This is huge from Florida's Voice. Florida Senate passes bill to set release of Epstein grand jury documents. The Florida Senate gave final approval to a bill that would permit the release of documents related to convicted sex offender and now deceased Jeffrey Epstein as part of a 2006 Florida grand jury investigation. The bill expands the rules for allowing the release of evidence and or testimony from a grand jury. Senator Tina Polsky, a Democrat from Boca Raton, filed the legislation. It passed the floor unanimously 37-0. At the time, Epstein escaped with far less severe punishment relating to allegations regarding his solicitation of minors for sexual activity. The Florida House of Representatives passed the bill last week unanimously. The House version was filed by Rep. Peggy Gossett-Seidman, a Republican from Highland Beach. Gossett-Seidman had said the victims of Epstein deserve to know more about testimony against Epstein in the Florida case. The legislation notably applies when the subject of a grand jury investigated is deceased. Epstein passed in 2019. It also applies when the grand jury investigation was related to criminal or sexual activity between the subject and a minor at the time of the activity. However, it notes the court can still issue redactions and other restrictions on releasing testimony. Now, aside from this, Ron DeSantis has tweeted out, all files related to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal activity should be made public. When the federal government continues to stonewall accountability, I'm glad the legislature has taken action to release the grand jury material from the Florida state case. I will sign the bill into law. It has been 18 years since this information was collected. When it was, they had real evidence that Epstein was doing really, really horrible things, and likely with very powerful people. They covered it up. I can't believe it took until 2019 to get a conviction, despite the fact that people had been talking about this for some time. 10 years ago, you were called a conspiracy theorist. Today, it is historical record and fact. I wonder how many powerful elites in the United States and around the world started sweating the moment this story, this news broke. 6 p.m. DeSantis says, 6 p.m. today, DeSantis says, I'm signing this into law. There's got to be a couple of rich people who are wiping their brows with their handkerchief right now.
I mean, let's hope so, right? We'd love to see things like this come to fruition because we want accountability. I think that's what the biggest shift in the Jeffrey Epstein narrative is that people feel as though they can not only say out loud, he did these things and it was bad and had a terrible impact on people, but also there are other people who are being kept out of the narrative and whose names are being shielded because of this, and that's not okay. I think before there was a time where it sort of felt like, well, there's nothing we can do about it, and I like the return to demanding accountability. This is
you asked me this as we're getting the story ready. You're like, why? How come we hear these things and like nothing happens?
Right.
And it's a good question. But my response was, and I'm like, we should have just done the show. I'm like, it was a great question.
The tapes on January 6th come out, or this is going to be released and everyone's going to hear the truth. They're going to get all this new information and then nothing happens. Or is something happening?
And so it's almost as, I wish we recorded it because I said, well, something is happening. But I think because of the internet, everybody expects everything to happen instantly. Like the news breaks and then you're like, okay, something should happen. When the founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence, it was a year and a month after the war had already started. So Lexington and Concord is 1775. A year later, they're like, okay, I think we'll declare independence now after a year of fighting. It took 3 months for that declaration to make it to the crown. Then they get it. Then they have to schedule a meeting, parliament, figure out what's going on. I mean, it's like years for just this one concept to happen. We're seeing all the stuff related to Epstein now. What I think is going to happen is more and more people cannot deny the reality of this. So it shatters the establishment narrative. Every time we get news, these documents are going to come out. It's going to implicate somebody. It's going to be terrifying and damning for these nasty people. They're going to be shaking in their boots and we're better off for it. You're going to have a liberal aunt or uncle or grandfather or whatever, relative, neighbor. And when this stuff comes out and becomes undeniable, as it's already been doing, they won't be able to reject your ideas when you say, listen, look, 10 years ago, you come out and you're talking to your neighbor and you say, this Epstein guy's doing this stuff. And they go, oh, you're nuts.
Yeah.
Now they're like, well, of course. So that's the shift. Where does this go? You will eventually end up with politicians, as we are seeing now. Why didn't Florida release these documents in 2012? No one cared. The politicians thought, what do I gain from doing it? Some lobbyist comes in and says, I represent a very powerful individual who does not want those documents released. And they go, okay, fine. Now you've got internet fundraising. You've got people like Matt Gaetz and AOC, for as much as we'd criticize her, but they're not beholden to powerful lobbyists anymore. They're beholden to internet masses and their communities who will fund their campaigns with smaller donations. They can say F you to the big shots. So when that lobbyist comes in and says, I represent a guy who doesn't want these documents released, they go, oh, that sucks for you, I guess. Now that people are demanding it and funding it, they're and funding the change and funding the politicians who are going to make this change happen. The more we get information, the more we can convert regular people, get them on our side. You will start seeing politicians make bigger and bigger moves. So this story is it happening. The documents come out in 2018, 2019. Epstein gets locked up. He dies. Everyone says, what's going on? We want to know what happened. Now, finally, Florida saying we're going to release the documents from 2006.
I think it's good. I think the transparency in general is good. Obviously, secrecy can be good too. If you're, weapons secrecy or whatever, but like you want to protect your national security. But I am also, we were talking before the show about the age of obfuscation. We're kind of like with AI is now kind of twisting and turning reality. So I'm not like, yay, we won thing. I don't know what's going to happen, because even if the data comes out and then people are like, no, you didn't read that. You thought you read that, but you actually read this, and they show you a different. I don't know.
When AI starts manipulating.
Oh my gosh!
But
that's kind of where
we got to figure that stuff out. That's for sure. But I think these kind of things happening, we can whittle it down to one simple point. It breaks the establishment narrative.
Yeah, and also like the federal uniparty that probably has people involved with Epstein more than like state governments are kind of beholden to the states. It's not the other way around. The states have a lot of power. DeSantis is exercising that power. I have a lot of respect for him for doing that.
It is interesting because from what I read, they introduced an effort to release these documents last year and it failed. And so this is the second attempt, which again tells that even 12 months later, there's a shift in culture.
Yep. We winning.
What I get nervous about is, do you remember what was the list that came out? Everyone's like, oh, they're releasing Epstein's list, but it wasn't. It was just people who were being called to testify. And then they release these documents and some are redacted and they're out of order and you don't really know.
Not even testify. It was just names that were brought up in the case.
That just appeared at any point, right? So that was sort of weird misinformation. I have this fear that while this is a victory and I don't want to take away from that, you could theoretically roll out these documents in a way that presents information in a biased presentation. I guess I wonder about what the effect will be long term. This is a victory no matter what.
I really like what you guys are saying. And Tim, you're reminding me the importance of playing the long game. You're just talking about how much we want instant gratification. We see something like this, or we see the January 6th tapes, or we see something else, and we say, boom, we want justice to be served right now. But what I see the Marxists have done, the leftists have done, the progressives have done is they're really playing a long game, and they say, hey, let's get a hold of public education and let's just work this for a really, really long time. And you might have think, well, it's not working. No, it's working very, very well. It's establishing the crack in the dam that ultimately will bust the whole thing open. But you've got to be willing to play the long game. And I think often conservatives aren't doing that, but I see the other side doing that very well.
I think people should understand. When I start a game of chess with, say, Ian here, I want to knock his king over right when the game starts, but you can't. Because he's got the same pieces you do, which means you need to figure out how to navigate that system to overcome his defenses and then checkmate his king. What we are seeing now is, sure, the January 6 tapes come out, more Epstein information comes out. What this is, in Florida, we moved our bishop across the board and we're securing, we're reinforcing one of our pieces, maybe putting a threat to one of their pieces on the board. We've not yet checkmated the opponent, but this is a part of the process where we are lining up the board for a victory.
That's so true, good. Kirk, about instant gratification. I think the society is kind of evolved or devolved. We've revolved into this sense of instant gratification with, 30-second clips and likes and all that. How many likes did I get? And like the long game is so key. The communist, as Yuri Bezmenov talked a lot about, takes 20 years to infiltrate a country. With the KGB, they'd be like, this is a Russian tactic, a Soviet tactic. As you get in there early, it takes you 10, 20 years. The Chinese, as far as I can tell, they're still fighting the opium wars from the 1890s. Like now they're feeding fentanyl through Mexico because what happened was the British colonized off the east coast of China and just poured opium into China in the late 1800s and just toxified their civilianry and controlled their nation through addiction. And now they're still, it's like the memory is not lost.
I also wonder how much of it has to do with the fact that so much of the American population gets their sense of how law enforcement and the justice system works through like Law and Order SVU. So you have this like neat little thing that ties up in 40 minutes, 30 minutes. And it seems like even though they'll put at the bottom, like these are months apart, your brain is conditioned to think, but it happens back to back to back to back. So
and CSI is the worst. I can't tell you. I mean, anybody who knows a cop or has talked to a cop about it, they go, oh, geez. I was talking to a cop out in West Virginia, and he was like, you will not believe it. We'll get like, someone will call in and say, someone broke into my garage and stole my, leaf blower or something. And we'll show up, we'll take notes, and we'll say, thank you for your information. And they immediately respond with, well, aren't you going to dust for prints? It's like, it's a $70 leaf blower. Yeah. What do you think we're doing over here?
Meanwhile, NCIS is like, there's the body. Okay, we've gotten the DNA back 5 seconds later. And every other, like anyone who's into true crime or police officers, like that would take months if we had the funding for it.
Yep. If we had the funding for it. Like, yeah, we could do it maybe in a month, but no one's going to spend the money on this.
Meanwhile, they have it by lunch. I mean, it's a fictional world. And again, that is a lot of people's exposure to how any sort of legal proceeding works.
It's crazy that it's been almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
The long game, I guess, is where we're at. Because I have been banging my head against the proverbial wall, trying to fix the world in like a talk show, in like a 2-hour podcast. And like, dude, there's that saying that you plant trees that you'll never sit under the shade of. You inspired Leonardo. We were talking before the show, like Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt got their start on your TV show in the 80s.
Right.
And without even knowing it, you were like mentoring those guys and showing them what a young actor could become. And now, like, I guess that's where it's at, is like teaching the children, is helping the kids.
Brad Pitt's watching around now being like, yeah, Kirk was great.
This, I think, I don't know who's listening to this program right now, but for the moms and dads out there who feel like, what can I do? I don't have a podcast. I don't have a television show. I don't have a bunch of influencers on this platform. But you know what? Playing the long game as a mom, as a dad, as a grandparent, I think is one of the most powerful things we can possibly do. I mean, what does everybody want to do? They want to get to the children. They want to get to the children through TikTok, Instagram, through Snapchat, through public schools, through whatever, because whoever has the time to tell the stories and set the values in the hearts and minds of children gets to control the future.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that true?
But your poor kids, Kirk, your poor kids having to look at the Tiger Beat magazines of you and like seeing all the celebrities.
We should pull those up, by the way. Those are hot.
We'll pull it up. No, but what I think is really, really important is we've talked on this show about the importance of having families, and here's what I love. Anybody who's ever played one of these strategy games like StarCraft or Warcraft or Command and Conquer, you just mass produce the lowest level fighter unit. So you ever see one of these video games where it's like you build a little base and then you'll like collect resources and then train soldiers? Instead of building the most intricate weapons and making your army have nukes, you just make millions of little soldiers. You send them all over to your enemy's base and they just through just volume wipe them out. What is it called? Zerging?
Yeah. That's Zerging? Actually based on the Zerg from StarCraft.
Right, you just mass produce the Zerg and send them over. It's the cheapest, smallest unit. When it comes to the culture war, there's a really, really simple way to win. And it's just to mass make humans. Just keep having babies.
You'll outnumber them eventually.
And the crazy thing is, this is actually what many other groups have said. Mm-hmm. The difference now is we're looking at the left. They're not having kids. They're aborting their kids. They're sterilizing their kids. But a lot of people have said, yes, Tim, but even if we do have kids, they're indoctrinating them. It's like, uh-huh. And Kirk Cameron is going to libraries and reading them books and making books and countering that. So if you have someone producing culture, and it's Brave Books, it's many others, and you're having more kids, you've won.
Yeah.
It just takes time.
I think Kirk is totally right. I think the parents are really on the ground level of this culture war battle because they are with their children. There's this line from the sociologist Neil Postman that children are a message to a future that you'll never be in. And it's like, it reminds me of the game of telephone. If you ever played that as a kid, where you like whisper a sentence in someone's ear. So to your point, if your children have strong values, strong messages, they have a good understanding of history and the culture that, could guide them to a better life, they are more likely to deliver the message clearly to the future that none of us will be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Were your kids post-internet? Were they young after the internet was out? Like, did you have to guard them from it?
Yeah. In fact, I even did a little documentary called Connect, which is all about raising kids in a social media world. So yeah, I remember all of our kids got phones at the same time. We have 6 kids. They're all 1 year apart. So when my kids were little, they were 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your house was so loud.
Very loud. Yeah, we were like the Brady Bunch. And now they're older, so they're all adults now, and they're doing great. But yeah, that was a really big concern. And it was at a time where we as parents are trying to figure all of this out as well. So it was a great learning experience, but it's a super big problem.
So we went to Timberline Mountain in West Virginia last weekend. Me, my girlfriend Allison, and we were riding on the ski lift. And behind us there was, I think it was a dad and like three little girls, must have been his. And they were all simultaneously going, ah, the whole way up. And we're in front. And I just look over at Allison and I was like, I guess they just discovered vocal cords. But I thought it was hilarious. It was funny. And then the dad says, you know that sound you're making? That's you're annoying people. And then they were like, oh, and they stopped. I just thought it was hilarious. I just want to tell that story.
And credit to that dad for not like losing his mind. He was just like, just so you guys know.
He said something like that. I thought it was great. He said something like, you know that sound you're making? Yet no one else is making that sound. And he's like, I think people are annoyed. And I was laughing, though. I thought it was hilarious. Yeah. I was like, little kids do little kid stuff.
But that's like such an interesting part of the way children's brains develop. They have to learn that their actions have an impact on other people. You know, like I think that would be the cool thing about being able to work hands-on with children, if you're a teacher or to have children as a parent, is that you have this direct impact and you get to see them grow and develop in real time. I think what's strange about so many people who don't have children but want to tell you what's good or bad for your children, that they should be at drag shows or whatever else, is that they don't experience this at all.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.